So we look at sales and marketing effectiveness very broadly, very holistically. And when we ask others, what do you mean by sales and marketing effectiveness? They often come back with quite a narrow definition. And it's often about how good a sales rep is at negotiating on the front line with their prospects or clients. And of course, that's essential. But that's just one aspect of competencies, which in turn is just one of the 12 dimensions. Because you could have a brilliant sales rep with amazing sales patter, but if the incentives aren't right, or the product isn't appropriately priced, or you're not optimizing what you're actually selling to which prospect or which customer group, or you're not performance managing effectively, then it's not enough. So we say that teams have to be a combination of focused, engaged, and enabled. And if you're just one or two of those things, you don't typically have an optimized sales force or sales and marketing effort. And we, both through our own projects, as well as studying the literature, know that any intervention in one or more dimensions can yield very tangible results. And it can do that quite quickly too. Obviously, some will take longer than others. And obviously, it depends on the context of your organization and just how immature your business is in one or more of these dimensions. So it's not going to be 20% for everyone, but it could be 20 or more in some areas, depending on maturity. And before we, in a moment, go to the specific dimensions and just introduce those and share some tips, again, just want to check in with you whether in your own experience you've seen dramatic or significant increases when you've intervened in some way in your respective organizations, or is there a dimension that you're specifically concerned about and hopeful that you can make a big difference in? So please either come off mute or feel free to use the chat before we move forward.
Andy, it's Katrina here. I've got a question about processes. I think that's very, very interesting that it can have an impact of up to 30%. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
But I will. We'll cover it. We'll cover it in
Okay.
Absolutely, Katrina. No, but that's great, and thank you.
The reason, just a quick note. The reason I'm bringing this up, I'm a great believer of setting processes in place to enable the team to focus on sales, basically, and not to wonder how to do.
Yep.
Very often, though, I feel like I'm quite alone with that thinking.
Yep.
And people said, just go and do it. And it's like, okay. So, yeah, be interesting hearing more about that one.
Yeah, no, especially because sales professionals, yourselves included, tend to be mavericks and more so than others in the organization, don't love to necessarily follow set processes, but they can make a big difference, and we'll touch on that. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Marek just to introduce our first dimension.
Great, thanks, Andy. So we're not going to go into a full seminar's worth of content discussion each of these, but what we wanted to make sure is that you're just aware of the type of things that we are going to cover. So, for example, this one on the right customers and prospects will be at 1 p.m. on the 4th of October, and then we'll go lots more detail, lots more discussion. But we just thought we'd just introduce some of our points of view on this. I mean, in terms of addressing the right customers, going after the right customer, companies often fall into the trap of just chasing, or salespeople fall into the trap of just chasing anything, whether it's, immediate, not strategic, shiny, new, whatever it happens to be. And that's not necessarily bad. There's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place for diversification. But there's generally, it's worth looking at why you're doing certain things. So, for example, looking at market mapping. What are our most valuable segments? What are most valuable potential customers? Are we selling the right products to the right people? Therefore, are we targeting appropriately? So just looking at, I mean, here's a simple chart of potential value of customers versus accessibility. So it could be, let's look at the ones that are most valuable, that we know we can get in with in the short term or the medium term. Maybe we have to do something different in the longer term to unlock these customers. But at least there's a method to the madness. So you can start to see, well, actually, why are we spending so much sales effort on some of these other customers, right? And then here, another thing that we often look at is sales underpin. So, you have a forecast. Are you likely to hit that forecast, right? You have a bunch of opportunities. There's some estimated value, probability. Once you weight that value with the probability, you start to see, well, you know what? Actually, it's looking like, in this example, we're going to hit 278,000 by the end of the year, but our forecast was 350,000. Maybe we should go and do something different. Can we target customers? Can we do something different? Can we reallocate resources? And I think, the way we look at sales and marketing effectiveness, and we look at these 12 dimensions, very often they're not in isolation. You might say, well, actually, we're looking at the right customers and prospects, but the insights we get from that can affect the incentives. Are the people, do we know who we're going after? But, the people are not incentivized. Do we need more sales resource? So we need to contract in some salespeople or do something different in terms of channels. And we'll go in more into those. I don't want to dwell on all of those too much right now. But all of these dimensions you can look at individually, but the real value you get is when you think more holistically. And that's, Andy showed that slide where we had this 30% uplift here, 20% uplift. Often the biggest value is when you look at these things overall. And we typically can do diagnostics across all of these, but we also often go in with the solutions. We can help implement a bunch of these things, processes, and help the analytics. And then finally on this one, before I go off on a tangent, profitability of customers. Very simple. In this graph, the first customer, the most valuable one, contributes 30%. By the time you get down to like your 10th, 12th, 20th, they're not really adding too much. They're just making everyone very, very, very busy, and some actually even erode profit. So, you don't always want to boil the ocean, but there's a few things it's just worth keeping an eye on. And if anyone has any comments while I'm talking, please either drop comments in the chat or just jump in. There's not that many of us, so if you want to jump in with any comments or questions at any point, please do. Cool. Okay, so this is a second dimension. So again, we'll go more into this on the 11th of October. Again, taking a slightly analytical approach to channel cost. Often people think of, yes, we've got the salespeople. They may cost less, they may cost more. Incentives can drive how much these people end up costing at the end of the year as well, of course. But there are certain overheads, travel equipment, especially when you're thinking about where do you want to go to market geographically, for example. What does that mean in terms of travel and other costs like that? Brochures, websites, samples, digital channels, digital materials, people to run that sort of stuff, all the sales systems, the sales operations, order management here. Often sales come through the technical department, right? That's a good channel for leads. So thinking about how to factor all that in, and then, well, what does that mean in terms of efficiently addressing customers? You don't want to go to everyone with the absolutely lowest cost channel, right? Because not everyone is receptive to that. But there's certain strategic accounts where you're selling complex. It's a complex sell. Your best products and services. Maybe you want to get a good account manager in with solution selling skills. But smaller accounts, simpler products, there are cheaper channels which may need to be enhanced in other ways, a combination of online telesales, perhaps moving to geographies you're unfamiliar with. It might be most efficient to get a distributor in to actually partner up. There are costs and other complications with that as well in terms of your control. But the point is that, if you do understand what the costs of what your channels are and what's appropriate, what your customers are receptive to, there's not a one size fits all. Like I said, welcome any questions at any point.
Thanks, Marek. Back to you, Wayne.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Marek. So one of the dimensions we'll look at, and we'll look at this on the 18th of October in its own webinar, is around the right products and services. And we've just dropped a few of the different areas in here, but thinking about, for example, product and service development. So, is this anticipating future trends as well as looking at current trends? And also slightly linking into that decision making, what are the customers and potential prospects needs? And one of the things we look for as well are what are the kind of feedback loops and what is the governance around that product service development as well? And particularly with a sales and marketing lens on, what's the kind of dovetailing between the different departments? Is the product development suite or function really dovetailing in and interlocking with sales, and is it very, very customer and commercially focused as well? We also look at decision making, and we look at if it's in a B2C environment, we will look at that, and we'll think about how we can actually really stand out and cut through from a decision making point of view. Bringing into things like, it almost gets into pricing here, thinking about hierarchy, and how that can help with decision making. But also in a B2B environment where it's often a lot more complex, we know that there are various decision making units, which sometimes I suppose we could say we're lucky, and it could be a single decision maker, but often, there are influencers in there are champions, there are users of the product or service as well, that we need to consider. And all of this goes into the product design, almost in the value proposition that we put together, thinking about who we're targeting and how, which then you can immediately think links into our marketing efforts as well. And finally, it's the smallest cog here, but that's only a schematic. It's probably one of the most complex areas, is the cross-sell opportunity. Something we see a lot is as businesses grow, they are developing products at a rate of knots. And if they're acquiring businesses, they're also bringing additional products on. And they absolutely are doing that on the thesis of wanting to be able to cross-sell. And it's just so complex. It's not as easy as just giving that to a bunch of salespeople, that new product, and saying, go sell. We know it's more complex than that. Is the right adjacency there? Is there the competence and the understanding within the sales team? And that good old-fashioned thing that we also look at as its own dimension, which is incentives. So there's lots of things to look at in there. And it's an increasing one, particularly when we look at in acquisitions and due diligence around investment cycles. People are looking to not only take on additional products as part of that next phase of growth, but also with future acquisitions. So cross-sell is a key area and focus for us. If you could just focus on the next slide, please. So this is one of our other dimensions, which we're actually going to look at next Friday. So it would be great to get you all back on Friday the 27th, and this is around pricing. Again, lots of different ways that we approach this. One of the pieces that's not on here but is absolutely implicit in our approach is a deep analysis, and that's something that we'll share some examples of next week. So we'll share some of the types of analyses that we do that can shed light and can offer up some immediate, I guess, opportunities. And often, and it's interesting, you asked the question, Katrina, about some of the different processes and things that can yield results. Often we see pricing as one of those areas that, done well, can actually yield fast results. But if we look at the right-hand side of the slide, it will only yield results if it's got all these three different areas of a framework in place. So our approach is often to, first of all, understand where is an organization at utilizing this framework. So setting how it actually sets prices, and then how it actually executes them in the market. So can it articulate the value proposition? If it's a cost price increase, for example, how efficient and effective is it at looking at that? And then when we're making those price adjustments, or we're going out to the market with price, how are we actually reporting back? How are we governing, if you like, the future moves that we might need to make? So that's a framework that we use. And then obviously, depending on the diagnostic that comes back, we can then support and often do support in any of the given areas that it throws up as needing help and support. And then just some ideas on the left-hand side there. Other things that we also look at, amongst there are many other, obviously, pricing strategies, some more creative than others. And one of the things we look at is, are they being utilized? And if not, could they be utilized once we've done that diagnostic and understanding the business model? And that's good fun. It's a really, really deep topic, and looking forward to going through it in more depth next Friday. So I'm going to hand now to Andy on performance management.
Yeah, thanks very much, Wayne. So performance management, we're going to cover in greater depth on November the 15th. What we typically see is that organizations do a pretty good job of measuring their outcomes. And those are the lagging indicators. So your revenue, your profitability. Where organizations typically don't perform well is on the leading indicators. And those are things like, how many meaningful interactions am I having in order to generate X number of proposals, which at a conversion rate of Y leads to my revenue of XYZ. We rarely see the leading indicators being measured appropriately and systematically. And if you don't measure those, it's too late to do anything about it when suddenly your revenue drops, because you should have had those meetings, those proposals 6 months previously. And what we often see is that organizations are blindsided. Suddenly, the revenue that they were expecting doesn't materialize. But because they don't have good enough tabs on the actual granular activity of their sales reps on the road, they're caught by surprise. What we also see is people measuring too much. And we always say, keep it very simple, keep it stupid and simple, measure 3 to 8 things, but ensure that it's a balance of your leading and your lagging indicators, and a balance of your new business metrics and what you're doing to retain and grow your customer base. And also to measure what happens when you lose your customers. Are you ensuring that they are back in the sales cycle and that you're interacting with them appropriately? Often customers don't do a brilliant job often our clients, I should say, but probably organizations in general don't do a good enough job of measuring the setup metrics. So all very good, I've sold something, but then there's friction. That means that the actual check doesn't get written for quite some time after I've sold. Again, that's something that you can measure that will stand you in good stead. So once you've defined your metrics, it's then key to act on them. And in order to do that, we always recommend putting in place a management cycle, a simple management cycle where you have regular discussions with the right people in the room, small number of people, short meetings, but crucially informed by the right metrics. And what we see is that either this is done very informally, or there are formal meetings, but the meetings are not informed by the right metrics. And so getting that right is actually quite tricky in practice, based on what we see among our clients, but it's crucial to get it right. Again, if any of you have any questions, observations as we go along, please shout. Very happy to share thoughts. And if not, I'll move on to culture, and we're going to be deep diving into culture on the 1st of November, Friday the 1st of November. And culture is it's a very nebulous one. It's hard to put your hands on. It's not like pricing or incentives where you can make a very obvious change, and that change has an immediate effect for better or worse in either the marketplace or in the way that your sales rep shows up in the morning to work. Culture is a more tricky one to tackle, but we would contend that where we see an organization that's thriving, and that doesn't mean that everyone gets on well all of the time. In fact, as long as it's done appropriately and in a safe way, having differences of view is absolutely crucial to move ahead. Culture starts with the, why are we in business? What are we doing? And if I'm sure most of you have seen Simon Sinek's inspiring Why Talk, but if you haven't, then check it out on YouTube. But it starts with the why we are in business, and from that, what values are really important to us. And again, when we go into client organizations, what we tend to see is the values existing, and the values may be sort of prominently displayed on posters and mouse mats and mugs. But what few organizations do very well is define those values at a very granular level. So if we've got a value of innovation, say, what does that mean for our sales reps? How do we expect them to behave? Well, you would expect them to forge very close relationships with product and service development so that they can be the voice of the customer and translate what they understand to be the customer's requirements from their day-to-day interactions with the customer to detailed requirements of product and service development. So what we recommend is that you take values, if you have them, and you define for your sales and marketing team at a very granular level for each value, what kind of behavior do I expect to see? And once you've done that, include it in your recruitment, in your induction, in your performance management, in your promotion criteria, and make sure it's fully embedded. Back over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, Andy. So yeah, one of the things we also look at is leadership. It's one distinct dimension, and we know this is absolutely critical, really, to be able, to facilitate and make a lot of the aforementioned and yet to be mentioned stuff happen. And we look at it in a few different ways. We obviously will. It'd be very unusual for us not to work with the leadership team anyway. So we immediately get a sense of where the leadership team is at. And we can support the leadership team as well through leadership competency frameworks and assessments. And that can be expanded to a 360 type of assessment as well. But we look at it in three areas. One is about leading the direct environment. So that kind of relates to some of the stuff Andy just talked through. So, setting the vision and direction, setting the kind of the demand trends, or understanding the demand trends, and also looking further out, not only at the strategy, but the specific, if you like, key points that need to be addressed within the strategy, like environmental and social impact. There's a direct piece which is about leading that next level of team. Sometimes that is the team doing the doing. Sometimes there are various layers, but again, comes in, is there a strategic perspective, the ability to kind of motivate and develop others, and are they a real change champion? I guess are they leading by example? And then of course there's a leading by self, and and that's very much the kind of demonstration of it, but also developing oneself as well. So all those three aspects are what come in, and then after any kind of diagnostic, the work that can go on thereafter can be absolutely multifaceted. Anything from one-to-one support and more of a mentoring capacity, or coaching, or working on some of the things that throw out of that, which could be around competence, which we'll come on to shortly. So that's leadership dimension. We've got a webinar on that on the 8th of November.
And just for Marek and Wayne, I think we need to speed up a little bit, just in the interest of time. But over to you, Marek.
I won't read every single word in this slide. The I guess the key message of incentives is that we've all seen a lot of incentive plans that keep people busy and keep people paid, but don't necessarily drive the right behaviors. So I think any incentive plan needs to start off with what do we need to achieve as a business, and everything gets driven from that. Is it we need to keep a few big customers happy? Is it that we need to find new customers? Is it that we need to focus on a particular product within our portfolio? Because that's how we're going to position ourselves for the future. And then that all drives everything else. And then you can think about, your base, your fixed base versus your variable pay mix, more, higher variable for hunters, more base for farmers, account managers. Is it an appropriate level of pay for the market, or are we overpaying? Right. Well, overpaying can be okay. Depends again where you are and who you're trying to attract. People do boil the ocean with performance measures. I like to think you need to keep these things simple. If you can get an incentive plan on 1 or 2 pages and people can understand it easily, then it's probably more appropriate. I've seen plans which are 20 pages long. I've sat for hours reading them. I still don't think I fully understood them. Now it's definitely got lots of things that are driving behaviors, but really it's not getting to the crux of it. And then there's all the design of it, where does it, eligibility caps, things like that. Is it commission based, goal based? Do you rank people? Do you do qualitative management by objectives? All things like that. And on the right here, we've got an example of a payment versus performance curve. No one gets paid anything until they've achieved 80% of the target. Again, that can be much softer, right? It depends what kind of corporate culture you want. Do you cap it? Is your forecasting strong enough that you don't cap it, or it does, still go up, but you expose yourself to a real rainmaker and, paying out unnecessarily. Anyway, there's all sorts of ways of designing these things, but fundamentally you need to drive what is it that you want to achieve.
Thanks, Marek. So this dimension we're going to cover in a webinar on the 22nd of November, and really links back into that leadership piece. So again, it often comes from a diagnostic. Now, the diagnostic can be through looking at a competency framework like we have on the right-hand side of the page here. And that could be, again, done through a 360 that we have available. But also sometimes it can be, through working closely with salespeople at the coalface, which we often do if they are, just in and around the projects that we work on. We will interact with them and we get a read on some of these things. But also we will and have been known to also do sales field accompaniments, for example, or virtual meeting accompaniments as well, to just get a view and a more rounded view. And then from there, really, the work can begin in order, how do we address it? So we have certified training within BFG, so we're able to actually deliver, if it's more formal training, which we would advise typically kind of 10% of the effort going in. It could be around coaching, management, and mentoring input, though, learning from others that we could support ourselves or could put together a program for others to actually support. And then the whole piece around back to work and actually learning by doing, which we'd always advocate. So 70%, that classic 70-20-10 model, but initially coming from a diagnostic, as I say, which can be a very rounded approach, not just a 360 assessment. So really, really key with sales and marketing efforts. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Wayne. I'm going to speed up in the interest of time. Katrina, we can talk about processes offline. But what we advocate is that you set out for your business what the end-to-end sales process looks like. And for any business, there's something around finding, something around winning, something around setting up, growing, retaining, losing and winning back. There may be nuances in your specific organization, but it's broadly going to look something like this. And then it's about a organization XYZ way of working, which might be in the form of a playbook, but specifically what you want to do is ensure that there's a consistent approach to doing certain key things. And we've just, in these circles, this is not exhaustive, but we've put a few in. So your approach to market mapping and segmenting and prioritizing your leads, you can get very scientific with that, and we'd encourage a consistent way of doing that within your organization. Proposals, some organizations it's completely left up to the individual sales rep. The issue there is that some do it better than others. We often don't see, for example, an upfront compelling piece about just how well you understand your customers' challenges. Too often the proposal starts with all about us and not enough about the customer and their challenges. We often see organizations either don't have account plans or they're done once a year and then not looked at again, so they're not living documents. They can be crucial. They don't need to be a Miller-Hyman overly complex monster. They can be simple on a page, 2 pages, 4 pages, but they can be really valuable. And then I mentioned previously about winning back lost customers. And all of this needs to be underpinned by the right technology. And it's increasingly rare that we don't see some technology enablers in an organization. But what unfortunately does remain persistent is sporadic adoption. And it's very disheartening when we see organizations have spent or are spending tens of thousands a year on Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, and a fraction of the functionality is being used because it's just too complex for the sales reps. So again, we would say start with your ways of working, figure out which ways of working can best be supported by technology, keep it simple, but focus on your adoption. And a couple of things that really help the adoption. Number one is leadership role modeling. When the leader is in the CRM and picks up the phone to the sales rep and says, did you go and meet this customer? There's nothing in the CRM about you meeting that customer. That's when it gets adopted. The other key thing around adoption is, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. One is leadership. Sorry, the other one is a single source of truth. So what we see in organizations is there are reports in the CRM or other systems, but at the monthly management meeting or the board meeting, the organization still relies on a spreadsheet and it's duplicated, and what's in the spreadsheet doesn't match what's in the report in the CRM. So use your technology as your single point of truth. Marketing, just going to fly through this. Again, most organizations obviously have a degree of marketing in place. They may have or may not have dedicated marketing personnel. Sometimes they'll have a fixed marketing budget, but often that budget is just 5% more than what we spent last year. And what we see very few companies do well is measure marketing effectiveness. And yes, sometimes it's hard to measure. There is a famous quote, half my money that I spend on advertising is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. So it's not always easy, especially around the longer term sort of brand building efforts. But the shorter term efforts are far easier. So a webinar like this, we can see who attended, who registered. In 6 months' time, we'll look back on this series of webinars and we'll say, well, who did we pick up as a client as a result of these webinars, and therefore was it worth our time? But we strongly encourage you to measure absolutely everything that you can, keep track of it. And what we see in practice is that not nearly enough gets measured, and therefore you just don't know how effective your spend is. Over to you, Marek.
Yeah, finally, I'll just whistle through this. I mean, there's a lot on this slide in terms of organization design. If you've got one rep in the north and one rep in the south, then you probably don't want to boil the ocean too much. But the key thing is that whatever you're doing, again, needs to be aligned with what you're trying to achieve. If you've got a bunch of reps good at hunting and you want them to manage accounts, that probably won't work. If you've got a load of account managers, you want them to find lots and lots of new business, that probably won't work either. So think about what do you want to achieve? What do the customers need? That's often forgotten. What kind of interaction do the customers need? What's their buying journey? And then that'll drive the activities, the skills, the roles you need. And there's all, size and everything like that. Just one thing I'll just mention is sales leadership. Obviously there'll always be a sales manager, sales director type role, but often there's a lot of value in a sort of chief commercial officer type role, whatever you want to call it, both in their value as a sales leader, their sales skills and their leadership, but also as basically being an enabler, a champion of all of these 12 dimensions, someone who understands the importance of holistically looking at sales effectiveness and driving that through. I'll leave it as there because I realize people are already starting to leave, and I'll just jump finally to the BFG grade. So we have a survey called the BFG grade. It's a self-assessment survey which covers our 12 dimensions. It's about 60 questions. Takes about 20 minutes to complete, and we send this out to you, and you can self-assess yourself, and then we'll play back your results. So, for example, here on the left, someone has scored themselves very, very badly on incentives, competencies, channels, pricing, very well on processes and systems. Okay. We'll then follow up with a free and no obligation discussion, about 45 minutes or so. We'll go through this and come up with some observations and a few initial recommendations for you, which may be helpful for you. And we're very, very, very happy to do that. And just another thing, there's often value in getting more than one person in your company to do the self-assessment. So we've done this with quite a few companies. On the right, we've got the CEO, the CTO, the finance director, a bunch of sales directors and managers all took this self-assessment of their own company, the same company, and came up with slightly different results, right? And that can be a great insight into their beliefs, how the sort of first line sales management looks at things versus the company operations versus the CEO. Fantastic way of getting insights into really what's going on in the company and how people are behaving, what they believe. So, like I said, if anyone's interested in this, we can very happy to send this out as a link and then have a follow-on conversation.
Many thanks, Marek. So just in summary then, assuming you are interested in learning more about any one or more or all of the specific 12 dimensions, stick them in the diary for 1 o'clock on a Friday, and the schedule is on our website, betterfastergrowth.com/events. If you'd like to take the BFG grade assessment that Marek just introduced, then ask us and we'll send you the link. And feel free to schedule a call with any of us or all of us anytime at your convenience. Before we just close, either in the chat or just coming off mute, any questions, observations, thoughts? Hopefully you found it useful, but anything that you were expecting us to cover and we didn't, or that you'd like us to cover on future sessions?
I think it was very useful, particularly like the performance management slide. That was quite insightful.
Okay.
One thing, Andy, I'm kind of always interested in, and I'm going to have to leave, unfortunately, about now, is are businesses going for the right size of clients, the right size of customers, and how long does it take them to land? So I'm generally a little critical of businesses who spend 12 to 18 months landing big fish, because you don't always get there. Whereas actually, are you better off, instead of winning £1 million clients every 18 months, are you better off winning a 200 grand client every quarter? Anyway, I'm just interested in your, not now, by the way, but I was just interested in building that in terms of that business structure and how to assess targets effectively.
No, that's great. And James, who just spoke, faces that question every day, don't you, James?
100%.
So yeah, no, we will cover that on future webinars, and it's a great observation and it's a tricky challenge. Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, well, I wish you all a very successful afternoon, great weekend. Thanks very much for joining. Hope to see some, if not all of you, next Friday. Wayne will be hosting the session on pricing. And thank you so much for joining us.